Alright, I want to make a super quick video on how twist locks work for a front axle. Back in the day, Chevy, Ford, and Dodge used to have hub locks. Simply what is going on here is you have a spline on the whole outside in here, and then you have a collet in there that ends up locking the spline that's on the hub to the spline that's on the axle shaft. That's all it does. All you're doing when you turn these things is actuating that spline manually out here. That's all that's going on. Now Ford, and I don't know if anybody else ever did a backup lock setup like this. Ford uses a vacuum system. They've used it forever, and it simply locks this hub manually. If you wanted to lock it, or excuse me, it locks automatically. If you wanted to go ahead and lock it manually, you can feel free to do so. You're doing the exact same thing as if you had it in auto. Now, why does this matter? Sometimes the auto system fails. It's vacuum. I wish they would do an electronic actuator. I don't really know why it's auto. My Excursions did fail back in the day, and I replaced them with full manual lockouts that are doing the exact same thing, except for you're doing it manually. You could have just left this all here and plugged up the vacuum system and used it simply as a locking hub. One reason why you might do that is to get a stronger set, or maybe you physically broke the splines on the inside of it. That could be another thing that you do. This system has zero communication with the middle of the axle. Some people think that you're locking a differential by locking the hub. You're not doing that. You're not touching a differential. That would be a really cool feature, but it's not a thing. All you're doing here is you're manually locking the splines of the axle shaft to the splines of the hub. That's all that's going on here. My 23 does have right side. This is the passenger side of my truck. It does have a manual lockout. I hear Ford is going to a non-manual hub lock on the right side of the trucks, probably to cheapen them up. Doesn't matter. Well, GM has been disconnecting the right side axle shaft since 1989. Is that the first year of the GMT 400? I think it is. So GM has been only unlocking one axle since the beginning of modern trucks themselves. Dodge also did the same thing. They use an actuator on some of the second gens and for sure some of the third gens that disconnect the passenger side axle shaft right in the middle of it. So the axle shaft is literally split, and there's a collet that slides back and forth that connects the passenger side axle shaft in the middle somewhere in there. Ford has never used that design. I don't think it's a very good design. I think the setup GM uses is really the only logical setup you would use on a independent front suspension setup, because there isn't a lot of room to put things. So by disconnecting only one axle shaft, you're getting a similar setup to disconnecting both, simply because the differential is not actively working. So that is a little bit of a description of how these hubs work. Now, why would you want to have the manual lockout besides failure? For instance, if you're off-roading and you don't lock in four-wheel drive before you get stuck, and let's just say you get stuck, sometimes the automatic locking setup will not lock in if you get stuck before you've locked in your four-wheel drive. So you can manually lock out your hubs and you are locked in. I've never seen a manual lockout hub not engage when you twist it, other than if it fails, and I've personally never broke one. So that's one reason to have it. You may not need it. Your vacuum system may be working, but if you get stuck before you're locked in, you may not be able to get into four-wheel drive, and that's why they're here. So it's a nice little backup. It's here for, the people who buy, not trying to be a hater, but a lot of times when people buy Ford trucks, they're buying them for work, they're buying them for commercial applications, they're buying them for job sites, pipeline, all that kind of stuff. Having manual lockout is super duper handy. I would say Dodge is being cheapy by not doing it. There is an aftermarket free spin kit that you can do to Dodges that either don't unlock, like my 03 Dodge has a full-time front axle. I like that. I would take that over having the lockout in the axle shaft, because that is definitely a weak link. I can't really see this as being any extra weak link, because you can manually fix it, and it gives you the added ability to lock it out when you're stuck and you don't have it locked in, and your automatic hubs don't seem to want to engage because they like to have a little bit of tire rotation. If you're stuck and you can't get any tire rotation. So if you're in goopy mud, for instance, like I was just in, all my videos have an inspiration. I just needed to do this. Automatic hubs wouldn't lock in, give them a twist, front tires are doing the job right away, pulls you right out like nothing happened. So keep that in mind if you have manual hubs. No, they do not actuate a mechanical locker. It'd be really cool if they did. That's not a thing, never has been a thing. There are 0 trucks ever built with a locker that's actuated via a hub twist. As cool as that would be, I'm totally with you guys. If that could ever be a thing, that is ridiculously cool, but it's not a thing. It can't ever work. You'd have to have some kind of like a quill shaft running down the middle of your axle shaft to have something way out here, do something way over there at your differential. So, a little bit of an explanation of hub locks. Have a great day.